Before we begin this morning, I just want to highlight a few things that are happening today and some fun events that we have coming up over the next couple of weeks. Next week is going to be National Invasive Species Awareness Week, February 24th to February 28th. This week is an international event to raise awareness about invasive species, the threat that they pose, and what can be done to prevent their spread. This is led by the North American Invasive Species Management Association, which supports local, state, tribal, federal, regional, and national organizations. You can find out more about National Invasive Species Awareness Week and the programs that are going on through this week on our website. And we also have a couple of special events going on to highlight this week in person in Ontario. We have a forest pest workshop happening in Hamilton next Wednesday, and you can find information and registration on our website. So please check that out, and maybe we can post a link into the chat through the morning so you can get registration details from there. I'm really excited about today. I am the Terrestrial Invasive Species Lead and the Forest Invasive Specialist at the ISC, and today is going to be all about terrestrial invasives, forest pests, climate change, and biodiversity. So I've been really looking forward to today all week, although I'm a little bit biased. I hope everybody that's joining can enjoy it as much as I will. We have a lot of great speakers lined up this morning and this afternoon. And we also have a really fun trivia event happening after lunch, or after our first session after lunch, I believe. Let me just double check the time. 1:20 right after our keynote. So please join that. It'll be a little fun event to break up all of the learning that we'll be doing this afternoon. But yeah, so please just enjoy the day. I think we have a couple minutes before we're scheduled to start. But it looks like we have all of our speakers here. So I think if everyone's ready, we can maybe get started. Madison is going to be our moderator this morning for our terrestrial invasive species session. So I'm going to pass it over to her and she can introduce our first speaker today.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Hi, everybody. Yeah, welcome to our first session of the day, all about invasive plants. Really excited to be here. We have 4 amazing speakers. Well, 5, really. We have a couple joining together, but so we're really excited to get started here. I just want to note that if you have questions at any time throughout a presentation, please add them to the Q&A box, and I'll read them to our speakers at the end of each talk. So let's dive in with our first speakers, Brian Colleran and Elisabeth Groeneveld from Ecological Land Management LLC, who will be talking about knotweeds and climate change. Over to you.
All right, there we go. Let's put on the show from beginning. All right, hi guys, morning. So as Madison said, I've got my own business. I'm coming to you from the Massachusetts, out on the coast of the northern U.S. I am a certified ecological restoration practitioner and professional wetland scientist, and I've worked in volunteer local regulatory arrangements we have over here. And yeah, I've focused a lot on knotweed. So the first thing I want to start with is just the Japanese aspect of the knotweed. There's work that they're doing over in King County in Washington State, where they're renaming the plant names that are a little bit too people place oriented, right? And so rather than calling it Japanese knotweed, I'm going to be taking my cues from those guys, and they've renamed it to Itadori knotweed. And you can see here in these clips from the Daily Mail on the bottom, the joke about the English knotweed, right? And the other clip up there, the other piece is something that was in Quebec, where they named it the yellow peril. You know, so you can see why Japanese knotweed is a little bit problematic, and why Itadori knotweed, which kind of tips its hat to the native name of the thing and recognizes the herbal qualities that a lot of people enjoy about the knotweed. It comes from that. So anyway, I'm just here basically to point out that there's a positive feedback loop between knotweed and erosion that's problematic. And it's self-reinforcing and it speeds itself up. And so if you have a little problem, eventually you have a big one. And I'm just going to walk you very quickly through this one brook that I happened to catch in southern Vermont. And the circles here, there's a tire in the river, that's one circle. There's a shed on the hill, that's another circle, right? Those are the reference points as my perspective changes. But the other circle there is a beaver dam that's relatively light. I checked in with an expert on beavers, and she basically said that these dams are supposed to be very easily washed away. They're not the kind of structurally engineered things that beavers make. It's a throwaway dam, in a manner of speaking. So then I came back, and again, two tires in the river now here. There's the shed on the hill, there's the dam. And that new circle, there's a little bit of a creek coming in. And I thought perhaps that I had missed an outflow pipe. It hadn't been on that day. You can see the obstructions, it's kind of hard to see. But that's flowing water, that white in the middle. And just keep an eye on the date there, right? So this is fall. And then in the spring, I came back. And with all the vegetation cleared away, you can see now there's actually a channel back there that's going around the dam, right? So that's unusual to my mind because, back here, there was nothing. It was just a dam. There was no channel. So anyway, again, this is April 11th. Come back 2 weeks later, some big flow events happened. My recollection is that sort of a big storm came in and helped melt the snow. And it basically carved out all of that land next to the dam, right? So this quote unquote throwaway dam that really didn't have the structural elements that would help it to hold stayed, right? And instead, the earthen embankment that was a solid patch knotweed, that's what went. And so things like this, obviously are an ecology problem. But what else? What else is it beyond an ecology problem? There's the technical sort of how does the erosion work question, right? So gradual or sudden erosion, lots of overland, fluvial entrainment, underbank undercutting, all of these different sort of processes that might happen. But this is what I think is the real hopeful and opportunistic point, right? If you can think about this problem in a non-ecology way, in a non-nature way, who else is this problem impacting? And how else can you think about this or any other invasive problem to sort of expand your pool of beneficiaries, right? I've got a few listed here, and the idea is if I take the nature out of it and I put in somebody else's waterway concern, how can I help their waterway concern? How can I help somebody else move their angles forward? And it changes the conversation. So that's my quick half, and I'm going to turn it over to Elisabeth now, who I really enjoy listening to her bits. So thank you all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just all right, getting my screen going. Good morning, and thank you for joining me this morning. My name is Elisabeth Groeneveld, and I'm a botanist at Laval University. For the past 15 years, we've been studying invasive knotweeds and how they spread through the landscape. Now, the first thing to know is invasive knotweed refers to 3 different taxa. We have the Itadori knotweed, which can be pollinated by giant knotweed, and it produces a 3rd species, the hybrid knotweed, also called Bohemian knotweed. Why does this matter? Well, the Itadori knotweed, if that's the only plant you have in the landscape, you can assume it's only spreading vegetatively. This is because it only has female flowers, at least in our area. So to produce viable seed, it has to be pollinated by giant knotweed or hybrid knotweed. If you have hybrid knotweed in your landscape, it could be spreading either vegetatively or through seed. They're fairly easy to tell apart. The Itadori knotweed has the smallest leaves with a truncate base. The giant knotweed has really huge leaves with a cordate leaf base, and the hybrid knotweed is intermediate between the two. Using a suite of 8 different phenotypic traits, we can tell the Itadori from the hybrid. We can tell these clones apart with about a 90% success rate as verified by genotyping. We know that with the knotweeds, sexual reproduction is possible, but we weren't sure how far north these knotweeds were able to set viable seed. We did a transect of 500 kilometers across the province of Quebec, and we tested the germination rates of seeds from knotweeds in each of these 10 towns. We found the seeds were able to germinate as far north as Quebec City. This is 500 kilometers further north than was previously known. As the climate warms, we expect seeds in Rivière-du-Loup and Rimouski to be able to mature and to germinate. Now, this was done in the lab. We germinated the seeds in petri dishes, but can they actually germinate in the field? To answer this question, we genotyped 80 colonies of knotweed that were randomly selected along a boulevard that's heavily infested in Quebec City. We found that all of the Itadori knotweed colonies had the same genotype. They were all genetically identical and had spread through fragmentation. Whereas the hybrid knotweeds, there were 13 patches and they had 10 different genotypes. This means that some of these clones, at least 10 of them, had arisen from seed. So knotweed can successfully sexually reproduce in the field. This is actually quite sobering, knowing that knotweeds can reproduce by seed because the seeds are light, they float, and they're eaten by birds. This gives the knotweed plants one more way of moving through the landscape. Now, although they do reproduce by seeds, the rhizomes are the main dispersal organs. The rhizomes are horizontal underground stems, and they can also reproduce by shoots and roots, but the rhizomes really are the main way they reproduce. And this was shown in a study that we did along the Chaudière River, which is near Quebec City. Each knotweed patch from the headwaters to the mouth of the river was genotyped. And we found that the Itadori knotweed, all of the colonies or all of the patches had the same genotype. For the hybrid knotweed, we found the same thing. There was only one single genotype. This implies that at some time in the past, way upstream in the river, someone had voluntarily or involuntarily introduced 2 patches of knotweed. And then these knotweeds had managed to move downstream over the years purely through vegetative fragmentation. You can see one of these fragments here in the picture. This is a clump of knotweed rhizomes that was ripped out during the spring ice breakup and deposited on the bank of the river, and this will give rise to a new colony. Knotweed is incredibly good at spreading through pieces of rhizome. This is a picture of a new knotweed plant, and I dug it up, and I found the original piece of rhizome, and it weighed less than 1/100th of a gram. Even a vanishingly small piece of knotweed can give rise to a whole new plant. Now, when you have a knotweed patch and it's producing seed and you want to stop the seed set, you can cut the stems and kill the seeds. But what do you do when you have truckloads of contaminated soil that's full of knotweed rhizomes and you want to reuse the soil safely without spreading contamination? Formerly in Quebec, these soils would be sent to a specialized landfill, which is very, very costly and also not environmentally friendly because you're throwing out soil that's otherwise perfectly good. So since 2018, we've been working on a project to treat these soils, and it's based on work that was done in France, but adapted to the equipment and the soils we have here. We start with the infested soil, and it's sent into an impact crusher that crushes the rocks and the rhizomes and all the particles of soil and sends them to a shaking screener. Out of the screener, we have 3 fractions of soil. We have the fine fraction of soil, that's 0 to 10 millimeters, and this is what we're aiming for. We also have 2 coarser fractions that are not considered treated, and they're sent back into the impact crusher. They go through the screener again, and all eventually wind up in the fine fraction. We tested this to see how well it worked with 3 control plots of untreated soil, crushed and screened soil, and then 3 piles of crushed, screened soil covered with a geomembrane. And it was very, very successful as a treatment. The untreated soil, after a few months of growth, had over 12,000 stems per 100 square meters. All the green you see in this picture is knotweed stems. However, the soil that had been crushed and screened had only 265 stems per 100 square meters. The green you see in this second picture is mostly just annual weeds that grew from seed. It's not knotweed. This represents a 98% reduction in knotweed regrowth. Even though this is good, it's not good enough to be able to reuse the soil. But once we add the membrane and let it sit in the sun all summer, we had 0 regrowth, a 100% effective treatment. So the treatments were done in June. I took the data in September, and I returned the next spring to double check that nothing had grown and the soil was still perfect. There was 0 knotweed. So in conclusion, for today, we've seen that knotweed can reproduce by seed. Knotweed reproduces very effectively, especially along rivers, by fragments, but soil that's infested with knotweed can be effectively treated through crushing and screening. And that concludes my presentation for this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth and Brian. That was really great. If you have any questions for our presenters, please pop them in the Q&A box and I can read them out loud. But we really appreciate you sharing all that information. I know knotweed causes a lot of stress for people and homeowners, so it's great to see what you're doing and to learn more. I'm not seeing any questions come in just yet. I know it's early morning. People are just getting going here. We will be putting emails in the chat as well for people to reach out directly. I see a question came in here. Have you continued to monitor the geofabric covered soil?
We monitored it for 1 year after we had finished the treatments, but after that, the site was reused for other purposes.
It's good to know. Did they follow? Oh, sorry, you can go, Brian.
I was just going to say, can I ask a question? Do you know what happened to the soil, Elisabeth? Do you know where it went?
That particular soil? I'm not sure. Those particular loads of soil, the owner of the site, he sells soil. He mixes it with compost and then sells it as soil.
Yeah. It'd be great to take a picture of it somewhere, functioning.
That's true. It wasn't ruined at all by the crushing. It made a really nice textured soil.
Awesome. The person that asked that first question about monitoring geofabric covered soil, they followed up and said, couldn't rhizomes still be viable?
Pardon me, could rhizomes what?
Still be viable after
No, not after that time. There were a few plants that tried to grow up to the geomembrane, but they were so small and frail that when we removed the geomembrane, they just cracked and died. They were like minuscule little things. And I sieved the soil with a fine sieve to find any potential fragments, and any fragments that we did find in the different fractions of soil, I grew them out in a greenhouse. And in the crushed and sieve soil, they just did not survive because they go through with a lot of rocks. That's part of the treatment, and they get crushed against the rocks. And anything that could potentially survive, it just cooks under the geomembrane.
Okay.
So we do recommend leaving the soil an entire winter to be sure that nothing comes up the next spring, but it seems to be extremely effective.
It's good to know. Yeah, this person is asking if you've tried geomembrane without crushing.
No, that's not a treatment we tried. We were looking for a shorter term treatment. And with a geomembrane without crushing, I don't know how many years it would take to kill the rhizomes.
It's good to know. This person's asking, how can a homeowner remove knotweed plant debris?
Okay, I think,
Oh, sorry, Shikha, you're just, there we go. This person, just the question again is, how can a homeowner remove knotweed plant debris?
I'd invite you to consult our website. I don't think we really have time to go through that right now. It can be done. You've seen it done. It's difficult. You just really have to keep at it.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see, we do have a couple more minutes for questions here. What is the opening size of the screener you used?
Ooh, that's technical information. I can't remember exactly. The crusher, the jaws were set to 45 millimeters apart. For the screener, we had two different screens on a 19-degree incline, and the resulting fractions, there's three of them. There was a 0 to 10 millimeters, a finest fraction, then 10 to 25 millimeters, which was coarse, and then over 25 is just stuff that was refused from the screen. So our target is 0 to 10.
Okay, awesome. If the knotweed is treated with herbicide, does the soil still need to be cleaned?
We haven't done any experiments with herbicides. I haven't seen any evidence like of herbicides, just not a one and done deal. It's many treatments over time. So I don't think it's really comparable as two different treatments. It's kind of two different goals. The goal of crushing and screening is quick reuse.
Yeah. And, to the other aspect of that, right? It's a percentages game with herbicide, and you can get a certain percentage going and maybe shrink, if you had to do it, maybe you get to that 98%, and then maybe you try your hand at finishing that 2% with excavation. But yeah, it would be an awkward combination.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I'll ask the last question here. Did you cover uncrushed soils to see germination rates compared to crushed?
We weren't looking at seed germination rate. We just looked at the regrowth from the rhizomes, and we did have a control soil, which was uncrushed, which had over 12,000 stems per 100 square meters. And then we had the crushed and sieved soil. And we also had crushed, sieved, and covered with a geomembrane. So just crushing is not enough. You still get regrowth of the 2%.
Okay. Awesome. That's great to know. Well, thank you so much, Elisabeth and Brian, for sharing your work. We really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. Next
Thanks.
up,
It's fun to give.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Next up, I'm excited to introduce Shikha Singh from the Jackson Lenawee Washtena SISMA to talk all about stiltgrass. Welcome.
all right, I think we're ready to go here.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. My name is Shikha Singh, and I am from the JLW SISMA, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of the work that we've been doing and some of the issues that we have. So, I don't know why oh, there it is. Okay, a little bit of a lag there. And so we basically are a group of partners and stakeholders who have come together to address invasive species issues. We are grant funded. And as you can kind of see, we are in this purple area, the Tri-County area in the bottom of Michigan. Sorry, that black arrow shifted. And we do outreach, survey management, consultations, and site visits. Our area has a variety of unique natural areas, and as I'm sure all of you have, a couple of highlights include Waterloo Rec Area, Pinckney Rec Area, really highly used parks. We also have Hayes Park and we have Watkins Lake State Park, which is jointly managed by the state and a county, which is also designated a waterfowl refuge. And we'll take a look at that location in the presentation. In addition to really cool spaces, we have a lot of cool species. So Mitchell satyr is, really critically endangered butterfly, and we have that in the park. And another cool thing I want to shout out is we have a really cool phenotype of the Massasauga rattlesnake. So this is all black in color. It's like painted just to kind of identify it, but we don't have this, a lot of the region has like the normal tan and dark brown, but we do have some totally black colored Massasaugas as well. So just to introduce you to Stiltgrass and generally in case you're not familiar, it is a grass and it's, shade, full sun tolerant. We find it in shady areas, full sun, and, it germinates in the spring and it dies back in the fall. It has an interesting origin story. It was first reported in 1919 as it was used as packing material for imported porcelain from China. And I'm assuming people just like packed it in and they just, threw it out in the backyard when they were, done with the material. And it's easily spread. And you can kind of see that, once it gets here, it covers everything. And you can kind of see in the map here, it's kind of spreading from the, Tennessee area. And we have a few spots here in Michigan. So for some ID help, it does have lance-shaped leaves, which are about 1 to 3 inches long, a nice pale color. And if you look really carefully at the leaves, you can kind of see that it has a midrib that is slightly off center. And it also has some reflective silvery white hairs. So you can kind of see it better in these photos. Alternate leaves, you can kind of see one leaf here and then one leaf down here. And it's important to note that when you actually take a leaf and you kind of hold it close to your eyes, sometimes you may not see that white coloration. And so, you can see only like the crease as is shown here. So there could be some differences there. It has about 1 to 3 flower spikes. You can kind of see, two kind of coming here. The third one is shooting up here. It's usually the terminal, and it kind of emerges out of the leaf axis. And generally, we see this occur around September through October in the regions. There is some variability depending on maybe some light, temperature, cool regions. The fruit is about, 3 millimeters long, almost like a grain. And it reproduces mainly by seeds. So, one plant could have like 100 to 1,000 seeds. And, I use this, loosely that, seeds could be viable up to 5 years. And there was some research, I believe, by Redwood et al. That showed that there was severe mortality in the soil within the first 2 years. And, these seeds are easily spread. We do see a lot of like deer activity. We see a lot of recreation, etc. So, I mean, these are really small. So they do cling and transfer easily. So really close up photo. Now, when you look at the stems, it can have multiple stems, which are kind of thin and green. And in the beginning, they're kind of plump, have a lot of water and moisture inside. But when they die off at the end of the season, it kind of turns into like a brown thatch, yellowish town, just like, regular dead grass. It does branch near the base, and I'll show you a better picture later on. It has some hairs at the leaf's sheath. We can kind of see that, kind of over here. And in the, later part of the growing season, it can have a purplish brown top. This plant can actually reach 2 to 4 feet. I have a picture where it's like almost, kind of like at the armpit level. So it can grow quite tall. It has long stems that sprawl, like a stolon kind of across the ground. And the interesting thing is that they also form rootlets at some of those nodes. So you'll have several stems that pop up across that stolon. And so that's kind of how it gets its name. It has like stilt like, props. And unfortunately, because of this growing mechanism, it can grow really quickly. It tangles really quickly. And so it really becomes a really messy thatch area. Fortunately, the roots are pretty shallow and you can give them a good yank and they come out pretty easily. So let's take a couple look at some pictures. This is like Stiltgrass on my left. And then, the one that has like the orange fingernail, like that is, a native grass species. So there are some differences in like the hair placements. This is a great picture of the stolon and the root nodes. If you look, maybe I'll show this one here against the backdrop. You have like a main branch, and then you'll see these like stems that kind of pop up. I'd yank this one out, and you can kind of see these small roots that are starting to emerge. And so we have seen this species in a variety of locations. We've seen them in like wooded areas. It's taken over like a lot of regions in Scioto Township, which is an urban area, in private residences. And some of the things that we kind of wanted to highlight is that, it is spreading in these areas because people have, shared landscapers. So people are coming and taking care of the lawn and they're just going from one house to another and they're not necessarily decontaminating when they leave each property. In one of the sites that I'll talk about later, we're also concerned about recreation. We are seeing this pop up along, mountain bike trails and in areas that have ATV tracks. So people are coming and going. One of the sites used to be like owned privately, and so they had people coming and going. And then when the government, like the state and then the county bought it, we had noticed some stiltgrass that was growing in the ATV tracks. And so there's just some of the pictures, like locations, and I really want to give a shout out to a collaborator of mine, Allison. She is from the Washtenaw County Parks and Rec Commission. She is truly a rock star, and this is an example of how we have, organizations like us who are government funded, and we have the opportunity to work with various local governments. And as I kind of allude in the presentation, like the fellowship. And Allison and her crew have been instrumental. Like the commission owns the property. And this was an example of we were able to write some grants, get some funding, and then organize and do the treatment. Now, Watkins Lake Park holds a special place in my heart because it is designated and is part of the Underground Railway in Michigan. It used to be a former farmland, and now it has been turned into a waterfowl refuge. It's a great place for birders, and so we do see a lot of activity, from birders and recreators as well. A couple of pictures, if you can get a flavor. This is one of some of the places where the sedges go, and kind of see the remnants of the old farm. You've got like kind of like a prairie habitat going as well. And so in this area, we do have an infestation in the forested region. So this is where the two tracks were and people were coming and going. It was confirmed in October 2020, and we began treatment in the summer of 2021 and is ongoing. We have had intense storms, which opened up the canopy, and that kind of hindered some of our treatment methods. And, part of the problem is that it loves sun. So when you have new spots open up, it kind of takes advantage. But we are seeing great results. And because of collaborative funding and grant work, we have been able to expand our surveying and treatment efforts to really have a shot at containing this infestation. So in this picture, like I said, partnerships are very important. And so we do work with a variety of local organizations. Some of these folks on here were not necessarily with Stiltgrass, but we have trained them. And so we do work on properties adjacent to this area. And the partnership is really helpful for outreach, survey, and management. And like this curve, it's been shown a few times in this forum, is that we do recognize the importance of public awareness, education, and outreach. And so, as you can see, when most people are finding it, it's typically when eradication is unlikely. So some of the things that we have done is, we've developed a 20-page management plan, really clear about, summarizing the situation, locations, how we prioritize areas, and then summarizing the management and outreach methods. And so this could be a cool document for those who might want to model some of our work. We have led a lot of training. So we have 3 trainings a year. These are MDARD pesticide training credits approved. So we have a variety of staff residents. And this is something that we work with local county roads commission, conservation districts, Tecumseh City Parks. And in addition to our partners sending their staff, we also have Michigan DNR and other residences. And, we do a lot of field training. We host folks, and so they get a chance to see what it looks like, obviously with proper decontamination. And then we also do targeted outreach. So, for example, we have a mailed letter with ID information and flyers that we have mailed to all the landscaping companies in the 3 counties that I work in. We also jointly did a postcard mailing to area residents with the Washtenaw County Parks and Recreation Commission, who also helped. And we, depending on the location and the time, and we each led different trainings, but they were done in tandem. And we have also created postcards and literature, which we hand out at events. We have various partners who request it. I know we dropped off some of our literature at the Ojibwe Provincial Park, so in Windsor, who've been really generous at accepting it, and then a lot of flyers and stuff here. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but there are some management options. We are using chemical herbicides. Mainly, we are using like a 0.5% of glyphosate. It's pretty efficient. But then we've also been doing a lot of physical hand removing in some of those sensitive locations. Some of our partners have done pre-emergent, and they've also done some flame spot treatments. So some of our concerns is that we do have, climate change is an omnipresent, challenge. And we also have, as I alluded to, newly opened canopies, which saw some increased post-treatment, and, a lot of physical barriers from a lot of storms that are coming our way. Warmer days, we also saw a lot of smoke, poor air water quality. So when you have volunteers working, it could be challenging. And then, we have a typical budget challenges, it can get emotional. It's a daunting activity. These can be hard to find. And so it's also not the only concern that we have. There are also a variety of other invasive species. So with that, that's all I have. So if there's any questions, I would be more than happy to address them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really great. Such a fast spreading plant. So it was really great to learn more about it and how we can prevent its spread. I know it's a regulated plant here in Canada also, and there's been some few small populations found in Southern Ontario. So really valuable information to us over here as well.
Identification is definitely the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and reporting when you do find it. So we have some questions coming in here. How did your team get a list of all the landscaping companies that you mailed Stiltgrass flyers to? Are they required to be listed in some state database?
We reached out to all the licensed ones. So MDARD, the Michigan Department of Agriculture, and sorry, I'm missing a letter there, MDARD. But so everyone is required to be licensed, and so we are able to look at their database and filter out via like the counties. And then I just also did the good old fashioned Google, to double check and cross check and see what I could get.
Awesome.
So we did reach out, mainly to like the licensed folks, which, unfortunately, if you have, your nephew who's mowing the lawn of somebody else, like we're going to miss some of those folks. But we're hoping to kind of increase our awareness within the landscaping community. And so this is something. So yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, thank you. This next question, this species more so than most invasive seems really hard to get people to care about. Have you found any ways of talking about stiltgrass that really connects with people?
Yeah. So there's two things. I mean, like one is like, context matter. So depending on which group you're working with, obviously in the Watkins Lake, the cultural and the ecosystem sensitivities, um, you can draw upon like how valuable this area is and how, its growth really does impact a lot of local native species. We have that butterfly and we have, it's not found in the marshes yet, or no, actually it's not found. It's not really a wet, marshy wetland plant, but there are some cool features around it. So really highlighting, the native species aspect of it. Now, when you're talking to landowners, as I said, that this grass can get like pretty tall, up to my armpit, and so it really does become kind of unsightly if you're trying to keep like a nicely manicured lawn. And so that if you're trying to like hit upon those who just want their yard to look nice, then you kind of have to promote that aspect of it, like how it's challenging to remove. And once it gets here, it can outcompete some of the native, plants that they're gardening. And it just really is like a pain. I kind of liken stiltgrass to like sand at a beach, like once it gets in your bathing suit, it gets in your, like your beach bag, it just is everywhere. And the same sentiment I kind of feel when I see stiltgrass. It's just, like you need to take a preventative action. And it's so much easier to like start at the beginning than it is. So just highlighting your time and honing in on like how important your time is um, in managing this.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. Thank you. What post-emergent herbicide do you use and at what percentage? And when during the growing season do you begin foliar application?
Um, our partners, I believe, use pendulum, and I know like some have used it like in early spring, so you want to use it before the seed emergence. But then I've also seen people, apply it kind of at the end of like the end of summer. So those are two things. I personally, unfortunately, have not used pre-emergent myself. So I cannot verify like, which one is better, but I can say that pendulum is. And if anyone has any questions, they can definitely email me and I can, do some sleuthing and get,
Yeah.
more better answer. But pendulum was the one.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you. And people are wondering if you can post the link to that management plan if you're able to share that.
I should, I don't know if I have it on, if it's on here, but I'll tell you what I will do. At some point, I will try to get it on our JLW website. And so maybe in the chat, I can include the JLW website. And if it's not on there, like, within a day or two, I am traveling. So I'm not in my proper location right now, but within a week, I should have something. And if not, please email me. I do have it and I do want to share it.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I think that'd be a valuable resource. And
Yeah,
we'll be posting your email in the chat as well for people to reach out directly.
excellent.
The last question here, with such a strong seed bank, do you see adequate results from herbicide application the next year?
We do. And it's, something that, I mean, it is a process that requires multiple years. We are seeing really good progress and we're working in a really challenging location. Now, one of our problems is that, like and we are really trained to look for this species. And so it can be a little bit difficult in the beginning if you don't know what you're looking for. And then, you have to really survey the location properly to really get a handle on treatment and making sure that you are, performing like a comprehensive treatment. I will say this is more anecdotal, but when you do have an established native, like thatch of grasses, that has been helpful in, minimizing, stopping the spread of stiltgrass into other areas. Um, but having said that, that's just anecdotal, and it's in a couple of, especially in one of the housing locations, we've seen that, and we've been managing that for like 3 or 4 years.
So, okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate taking the time to answer all those questions. There's a comment here saying that they love the Lord of the Rings theme that you have going on, and I agree. It's really fun.
Thank you. And we couldn't do what we do without the support of our granting. The Michigan Invasive Species Grant Program has really been supportive of our effort, and as well as our partners. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate your time. So with that, we'll move on to our next speaker, Cathy Kavassalis from the Canadian Coalition for Invasive Plant Regulation and Master Gardeners of Ontario, who'll be talking about plant trade regulations. Thanks so much, Cathy. Excited to hear your talk.
Wonderful. Let's see if I can get this up to share. Whoops, wrong screen. Hang on one second.
No worries.
We want to share this one. Okay.
Perfect. It looks
my
great.
screen. Okay, great.
I can.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I am Cathy Kavassalis from the Canadian Coalition for Invasive Plant Regulation and Master Gardeners of Ontario. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about invasive plants. We know invasive plants are displaced species. They've moved by people out of their native ranges into regions where they harm the environment, economy, and the quality of human lives. By looking through a historical lens and examining the roots of this displacement, I hope we can better understand why the horticultural and nursery trades are the primary pathways for the introduction of invasive plants, and we can gain valuable insights into how to best slow their spread. Invasive plants didn't become a global issue overnight. While plants have always moved with people, the scale of the plant movement really exploded during the colonial era, when European powers sought to control foreign lands and their natural resources. Plants for food, fashion, medicine, fiber were traded as commodities of economic importance and cultural value. In the 17th century, the global networks were flourishing and exotics were in high demand. For example, in the Netherlands during tulip mania, a single tulip bulb sold for more than a skilled artisan could earn in a year. Later, other botanical crazes like orchid delirium, fern fever, and the widespread obsession with lawns emerged. And these captivated both gardeners and entrepreneurial collectors alike. Bioprospecting was lucrative business, and botanic gardens became the hubs for trade. For example, in 1817, giant hogweed, illustrated here on the right, was sent from Russia's Gorenki Botanic Garden to Kew Botanic Gardens in England. It was identified as garden worthy by one of the elite few that collected exotic plants. And from, Kew Gardens and Gorenki Gardens, it spread around the world by botanic gardens and traders to North America, Australia, New Zealand, where today it has become a public health hazard. Traders like Carter's Tested Seed boasted about distributing seeds to emperors, kings, shahs, presidents, to botanic gardens and public gardens, to agricultural and horticultural societies, to acclimatization societies and distributors worldwide, Europe, Asia, Africa, America, and colonies all around the globe. invasiveness was not a consideration, but climate suitability and vigor were. One vigorous plant, Itadori, which was discussed earlier this morning, Japanese knotweed, was praised by its collector, Philip von Siebold, as inextirpable, something impossible to remove. In 1847, it was celebrated in the Netherlands as the most interesting ornamental of the year, and clones of von Siebold's plant were propagated by von Siebold and Company and were sold across Europe, eventually distributed around the globe, and those same genetics are with us today. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature listed as one of the worst 100 invasive species in the world. Why were exotic plants like knotweed so popular? Well, for the European gardeners, these were showcases, their gardens were showcases of imported plants. They were displays of wealth and power, and they symbolized European control over distant lands. Gardens were seen as expressions of status and piety. And this idea was shaped by influential figures like Francis Bacon, who gave directions for the creation of a perfectly princely garden. And these gardens contained such things as finely shorn green lawns and beautiful plants such as English ivy, periwinkle, and roses. To Bacon, gardens that improved upon nature were reflecting the divine. So settlers carried this cultural heritage with them. And by the late Victorian era, famous garden designers like Gertrude Jekyll echoed Bacon's ideas. She encouraged gardeners to exert disciplined authority over the land. She believed that culture must uproot and rearrange nature to create spaces for beauty and the pleasure of people. Modern gardeners are still adorned with finely shorn green lawns and princely plants like roses. Roses are global icons of beauty, and colonial settlers spread this iconic beauty around the world, but in doing so, unfortunately introduced several highly invasive species of rose like dog rose, sweetbriar rose, the rugose rose, and the multiflora rose that's illustrated here on the left by the celebrated 19th century botanic artist Pierre Redoute. To establish rose gardens across the European colonies, certain favored varieties of roses had to be grafted onto vigorous roots of species like Rosa multiflora, the multiflora rose. This improved their adaptability to the diverse climates that they were meeting. Volunteers with horticultural and acclimatization societies took up the serious task of remodeling nature. They worked to introduce familiar plants to comfort homesick settlers and to spread countless other exotic plants for their perceived aesthetic and economic value. They believed it was justifiable to destroy some elements of nature to make way for what they deemed more valuable, and they unwittingly smoothed the path for not just benign hybrid tea roses, but for the future spread of invasive plants through the horticultural and nursery trades. So today, multiflora rose, known for its ability to sucker and produce copious rose hips, threatens biodiversity in Canada. It poses risks to human health by providing habitat for ticks and mosquitoes. It creates impenetrable barriers and reduces pastoral productivity. Recognizing this, the economic costs of this, Ontario's Auditor General recommended banning its sale. However, it continues to be sold and used as rootstock in modern rose propagation. Federal, provincial, and regional governments have yet to act because roses are valued ornamental plants. Certainly, most non-invasive roses are valued over weeds. But what defines a weed? It's a socially constructed term for an unwanted plant. When settlers attached weed to the names of many plants such as Joe Pye weed, butterfly weed, jewel weed, milkweed, pickerel weed, they diminished their value. This devaluation made it seem almost necessary to replace them with more desirable, garden-worthy plants. Oh, sorry, lag in my slide not advancing here. By labeling native plants as undesirable and associating princely plants with wealth and luxury, colonial traders fostered a demand for ornamental exotic plants and meticulously maintained lawns. And they established lucrative markets. In many regions, property standards and bylaws reinforced these ideals by mandating conformity to culturally constructed colonial standards of beauty. This legacy continues today, and colonial values remains embedded in the nursery industry. The marketplace continues to favor exotic species valued for their novelty and ornamental appeal, rather than their ecological roles. Influential gardener Martha Stewart recently praised the beauty of invasive burning bush growing on the land in her care, saying it covered the forest brilliantly. She followed this with the statement, "I plant what I like." This reinforces the belief that the aesthetic value of plants outweighs their potential for ecological harm. Plants are seen not as living organisms in relationship with other organisms, but as in colonial times, decorations to improve the pleasure of outdoor living spaces. To reduce the flow of invasive plants, we need to acknowledge our colonial history and the value system that is embedded in names, laws, and attitudes towards plants. Many Canadian horticultural societies were established in colonial times, and they remain legally tasked with improving landscapes by importing and distributing new and valuable plants. So we need to think about what we value. The Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services emphasizes that shifting values and attitudes is essential if we want to better protect nature and reduce the spread of invasive species. For centuries, gardening was shaped by colonial ideals of control and aesthetics, prioritizing human desires over ecological relationships. So now we must redefine gardens, not as curated showcases of global imports, but as dynamic ecosystems where plants can do far more than adorn a space. Gardens are living networks rooted in the soil, filtering water, cycling nutrients, and shaping the landscapes we depend upon. The plants within them sustain not only pollinators, but the broader web of life. When we choose what to grow, we shape more than a garden. We shape the health of the world around us. By recognizing and embracing these connections, we can create landscapes that balance beauty, human needs, and ecological responsibility. This shift requires education, and champions like master gardeners and the Canadian Coalition for Invasive Plant Regulation are having and leading respectful conversations with nurseries, homeowners, and policymakers. We're explaining the harm done by invasive plants and suggesting alternatives, but education is not enough. We need stronger governance policies. We need policies that call for the screening of plants for invasiveness and stricter regulations of the plant trade to prevent new introductions and reduce the spread of harmful species already in circulation. By taking these steps, we can prevent and reduce the impact of invasions by protecting both ecosystems and economies. Every dollar invested in prevention can save up to $50 in management, containment, and restoration. When the sink is overflowing, you don't start mopping the floor while the tap is still running. You turn off the tap. So to prevent the irreversible damage to natural systems and reduce costly mitigation efforts, we must address the root cause of plant invasions and unregulated plant trade. In closing, I invite you to reflect on how our colonial history has shaped our landscapes, not just through plant introductions, but through the values that underpin our gardening traditions. We've inherited a marketplace that prioritizes aesthetics, novelty, and profitability over ecological responsibility. By recognizing this legacy, we can begin to shift our approach and work towards decolonizing the garden. You can help. Advocate for the removal of invasive plants from the marketplace. You can help. Advocate for stronger screening policies and a governance system that prioritizes biodiversity over a largely unchecked plant trade. To learn more and take action, please visit our website, sipper.ca. I believe together we can make a meaningful change. And I'll thank you for your time and interest and stop now to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Cathy. That was a great presentation. I think it gave us all a lot to think about for sure. There's a lot of positive comments in the chat right now. Thank you so much for this needed presentation. People are really resonating with what you've spoken about today.
Thank you. And again, lots of information on our website. It needs a little bit of work and organization, but you can email me. My name is provided, or the info@sipper.ca to learn more. And again, there's so much to learn about plants and their introductions. I hope that people take action.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really interesting to hear the history of plant invasions too. I think we kind of need to talk about that sort of thing more often, and it can be really useful moving forward. Try not to repeat those same types of mistakes.
Well, what's really fascinating, one plant collector, Nathaniel Wallach, introduced 190,000 plants from the Calcutta Botanical Garden in the course of 4 years. He spread them around the globe. I mean, it was just a major explosion. And that's, the history is with us today.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. Yeah, there's so many comments right now. Excellent presentation. Great presentation. I remember seeing one up here. I'm just trying to scroll to it. So many comments. This is wonderful.
Again, I'm happy to share the presentation with anyone in my notes.
That's great. That is somebody did ask that in the Q&A if you could share part of this entire presentation.
I can make it into a PDF if you email me. I'm happy to share it. And again, it's only a 10-minute talk. You can watch it again too. And again, to get it into the time frame, there's so much more that we could have put in here because I think it's, that history is largely unknown by most people and even most gardeners that we need to work on spreading the word.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be sharing Cathy's email in the chat so you can reach out directly. And we also will be recording these presentations. They'll be up on our YouTube channel so you can refer to them anytime as well. Yeah, there was one comment here saying a garden center in my region sold multiflora as a native species. And I think that can be difficult. We're so well intentioned. You want to build up your garden and, have that green space, but it can be difficult to tell what's invasive, versus what's native sometimes.
Absolutely. And botanical knowledge is scant. We aren't producing a lot of botanists, and we're certainly not producing many taxonomists. And I often go to nurseries where the staff, well-intentioned, really don't know what a native species is or what is invasive. And that's why we really need, official lists, and the government needs to get involved. The federal government needs to create a database where we can find that information out. Even common names like Itadori versus Japanese knotweed, having that in one place where you can find the information and know what you're looking at is absolutely necessary.
Oh, that would be very valuable for sure.
Okay, Madison, if there are any specific questions, please.
Yeah, there are. We do have a couple more minutes for questions, and this was people are really excited about your presentation. So if you have some time, I'll ask a few more here.
Absolutely.
Are the Master Gardeners organization working to develop advice on how to design native plant gardens? Any kind of resources?
Yes, there are many Master Gardener groups all across Canada, and we have sort of met on this subject. Certainly, Master Gardeners of Ontario has been an enormous champion in this area. And if you go to our Facebook group, Magoy is Facebook, we have lots of lists, and you'll find regional lists as well. So for instance, I'm with Halton Region Master Gardeners, and we can provide local lists. There are many groups, keystone species, this sort of thing. Dr. Doug Ptolemy's group, and in the United States, the National Federation of Wildlife has lists of keystone plants, that can better support biodiversity. So we have lots and lots of alternatives and lists in the Ontario Invasive Plant Council. works on developing alternatives to invasive plants, and they have a brochure for, say, Northern Ontario and for Southern Ontario. You'll find the same thing in Nova Scotia and in the Atlantic provinces. They've created some wonderful Grow Me Instead guides, and you'll see those also on the West Coast with in the British Columbia groups. So depending where you are, there are many regional groups that are working on these things. They need more resources and funding, obviously, but there's a lot of people interested. And if you want to find the information, we can help you get there and point you to a group that has the knowledge you need.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Are there any books you would suggest on the subject of natural history of gardens and cultivated plants?
Ooh, that's hard. I do have a resource list, and what I suggest, please email me because I can't point to one thing off the top of my head, but to prepare this talk, I had so much fun just looking at all the various plant collectors and trying to decide which ones I wanted to highlight. So there are a number of books on the subject and a number of references. Be very happy to give you. So again, email me and I'll provide you a little short collection of reading that you can do, because I think the history is fascinating, and it truly informs the culture that we're in today that needs to be changed.
So no, I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, people are asking for your email address. We did pop that in the chat box. So I think you're going to get a lot of people reaching out to you directly. Seems like a lot of interest. There are a couple more questions in the Q&A box. So Cathy, I'm hoping that you can stick around and just answer those for people, and go ahead and look through the chat. But we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
That was
Appreciate
really
your
great.
time, everybody.
Thank you. All right, our last speaker of this session is Heather Jensen from Firewood Ecological Services, who will be talking all about Japanese knotweed. Thanks so much for being here, Heather.
Thank you. Am I okay to share my screen now?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. Okay, and I am going to stop my video just to preserve bandwidth while I'm giving the presentation, and I'll come back for the Q&A.
No problem.
Okay. Right. Why is it not letting me? Okay. Okay, are you seeing my screen?
It's just, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, we're good?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have been working on this project on and off for about 20 years now, and I am really excited to talk about it today. So Japanese knotweed, which I'm going to refer to as knotweed for the rest of the talk, is an introduced invasive plant that spreads rapidly, impacts native biodiversity, and inhibits riverbank access. It forms large clumps 1 to 3 meters high and expands into large, dense stands. It reproduces by seed, stem fragments as small as ½ an inch, and extensive rhizomes 7 to 20 meters long, and it leads 2 meters deep. And that's what makes management of this species so complicated. It thrives in a wide variety of habitats, such as riverbanks, wetlands, along roadways, and disturbed areas. And riverbanks dominated by knotweed tend to have finer sediments, and they're prone to slumping and erosion. So during high water events and floods, the knotweed is dislodged, the fragments are swept downstream, and they establish and grow quickly in this now freshly disturbed sediments, and they outcompete native species with their high nutrient, light, and water demand and allulochemical properties. I just wanted to quickly show the native range and the extent of the Japanese knotweed invasion here on this slide. So what to do about it? Some treatment options include manual methods, such as repeated cutting and mowing, digging and removal. This is highly accessible to any landowner or manager. There's also covering with plastic or geotextile membranes, and that can be combined with planting in the slits of these membranes some fast-growing species. It's important to remove and dry all plant material. because of how knotweed can propagate so easily, as I mentioned earlier. Biological treatment is not practical for most people. I just wanted to mention that a leaf feeding ciliate is in some pilot experiments are being conducted, and it's approved for release in the US. There's also goat grazing, but again, not very practical because it's resource intensive. So chemical is very effective. It does require repeat application, and it can be non-selective and may persist in soil and water, which is a concern in riparian areas. So it's important to have an active ingredient that moves into these extensive rhizomes at a sufficient concentration to kill the plant, which is primarily below ground. So some options to do that are glyphosate and imazapyr, which are both approved for use near water and are have relatively low toxicity. They can be used alone or in combination. And I also wanted to mention adjuvants, which enhance the herbicide properties and help them further penetrate the site of application. So how to apply these chemicals? There's foliar application, which is more effective when used in combination with cutting because knotweed is so tall, but it's non-selective. There's something called cut and fill or cut stem application where a chemical is applied directly into the the open well of the stems, which are hollow, immediately or at a later time. Injection is when up to 5 milliliters of chemical is injected into the hollow stem just below a node. A sharp tool such as an awl is needed, otherwise you will break a lot of needles because it's very tough material. Each stem should be treated. This is effective, but it is obviously labor intensive. And depending on the chemical, it's not necessarily something that landowners and managers can do themselves. They may need assistance from a licensed herbicide applicator. The objectives of this study were to compare herbicide and non-herbicide treatment to determine which control methods would be the most effective and have the least native impact to native biodiversity. And to do this, I first conducted a literature review and interviews with several land managers already working with knotweed, and then developed a pilot project to address the following research questions. Will different treatment methods more effectively suppress knotweed? Are more established colonies less impacted by treatment? Does knotweed presence and vigor impact plant biodiversity? Will different treatment methods more effectively promote other plant species? And what types of plants co-occurred with knotweed such that they could be targeted for future restoration projects? My hypotheses were that herbicide treatments would most effectively suppress knotweed, that more established colonies of knotweed would be less impacted by treatment and would require multiple rounds of treatment, that knotweed presence and vigor would impact plant biodiversity, non-herbicide treatments and injected treatments would most effectively promote other plant species, and that more perennials and non-natives would exist with knotweed than annuals and native species. These hypotheses were tested by comparing measurements from different treatments over time in this pilot project. So this is the study area, and I just wanted to give you, for reference, here is Ontario. So we're in relatively southern New York here, in the town of Hancock, which is where the main branch of the Delaware River begins, where the east and west branch join at a place called Junction Pool. And there is a fishing access and picnic area there, historically plagued by knotweed. And I used 3 distinct stands that were stands of knotweed that were naturally separated by other vegetation, and they were all within the same floodplain environment, and I call them A, B, and C. So this is just a zoom in of the study area, just to get a better idea of where we are. And a study was recently done by another group, and they used aerial photography to determine the extent of knotweed in the area. And this is the study area here, so you can see there's still quite a bit. So the experimental setup, 54 1x1 meter plots were delineated with plastic sheeting and wooden stakes at least 1 meter apart. And there were 18 plots in each of the 3 knotweed stands. So we had the community involved in that a Boy Scout troop helped build a knotweed drying platform And my design is here. Feel free to use it. It's made out of chicken wire and wooden boards, and they got a badge for helping out that day. And you can see the knotweed drying platform in use here on top of a black plastic sheet. And I wanted to say also, yes, so this is to dry them out in the sun, let them bake, and then the material can be disposed of afterwards. So the treatments that we used, so we used that cut stem treatment that I mentioned earlier, where 1.5 to 5 milliliters of chemical or treatment was sprayed directly into the open well of the cut stems. So we had water, lime, which this had been used in a pilot study in Western Pennsylvania, and they had some success with it. And because it is so accessible to homeowners, we wanted to try it here to see if it matched up against herbicide. So I have glyphosate and what I call the thinvert combination, which is a glyphosate, imazapyr, and thinvert adjuvant. There was a plastic sheet treatment, which was the stems were cut, a 3 millimeter thick clear plastic sheet was placed over the plot, weighed down with a few rocks, such that the knotweed stems could bake in the sun. Injection treatments, which I described earlier, we had the same protocol again, water, lime, glyphosate, the thinvert combination. And each of these were randomly assigned and repeated in each of the 3 stands to make up the 54 total plots. The quick overview of the project timeline here, the plot setup, treatment, and initial monitoring took place in August to September 2004. 1 month after the treatment, there were remnants of a hurricane that hit the study area and took out 19 of the plots. The rest were monitored. I removed the plastic sheeting from the plastic sheet treatment plots, seeded them all with a native warm season grass mixture to see if anything would take in that after treatment. 2 months after treatment, the plots were monitored. 1 year after treatment, they were monitored again, lost 3 more due to natural causes, still have 32 plots. And the data analysis will be completed this year. And here's a beautiful picture of some dead knotweed in a treatment plot surrounded by the rest of its healthy stand. So speaking of pictures, I wanted to show a photo series of 2 different treatments. So the top one is a glyphosate injection. So you can see here, this is 1 month after treatment, looks pretty dead. 2 months after treatment, same. 1 year after treatment, there's some regrowth here, but far improved from where we started. So water spray, this is a cut stem treatment. So looks pretty dead 1 month after treatment. 2 months, still pretty dead. 1 year later, it all came back, which is what we'd expect with water. So monitoring, and I mentioned there was before treatment, 1 month after treatment, 2 months after, 1 year after. There was a visual knotweed health assessment rating scale that I did 3 times before it was all perfectly healthy. Photos were taken of the plots 3 times. The soil pH was measured before treatment and 1 month after. There was no statistical difference, so we did not continue this monitoring portion. The plots were assessed for germination of the native warm season grass seed mix 2 months after treatment. And then the knotweed stem count, diameter, and standing height within each plot, diversity and stem density of other species within each plot, and the knotweed stem count and diameter in 1 meter buffer zones surrounding the plots were measured before treatment and 1 year after treatment. The analyses, photos were sorted by plot. The photos of non-knotweed species were identified, or I should say the non-knotweed species were identified consistent with the New York Flora Atlas, and the photos were entered into iNaturalist. The growth form, life history, and native status of non-knotweed species were noted. The species diversity was calculated for each plot, total native and non-native. The Shen and diversity index and equitability and evenness indexes will be calculated. For a more specific stem count analysis, I divided the knotweed stem diameters into 3 classes, small, medium, and large, so that I could further refine something that knotweed does when the plant is stressed. It sends up a bunch of small shoots, and so the stem count analysis would be skewed otherwise. So this is just another analysis that's going to be done. So there's lots of data. There's 20 variables, 25 different analyses. will be performed to answer the 5 study questions. Unfortunately, because of the loss of plots, there's an unequal number of replicates per treatment, which is called an unbalanced design, which made the statistics a little more challenging, but not impossible. And I'm using SAS for the statistics. So some preliminary results, as I mentioned earlier, there was no difference in soil pH prior to treatment and 1 month after treatment. It was not statistically significant, so there was no need to continue that monitoring. Are there differences in the mean stem diameter in the plot among treatments after 1 year? Yes, this was highly significant for the treatments of the stem diameter of the injected water treatments was significantly larger than that of the injected glyphosate treatment, of the injected Finvert combo treatment, and the Finvert combo spray. Which is good. That shows that those treatments were significantly more effective than the control. There were 38 other plant species, 506 total stem count of other species. I listed the most common species here, some of which are obviously not candidates for restoration, but some of them might be. So this is just the most common ones, but there are many more. Are there differences in the stem counts of other species in the plot among treatments over time? No, this was not significant. However, there are 22 more analyses to go, so stay tuned. These results will help inform future restoration strategies utilized by landowners and managers and ecosystem restoration practitioners at all scales within the region and beyond. And I will be presenting the final results at an upcoming webinar for the Society for Ecosystem Restoration Mid-Atlantic chapter. The date has not been set yet, but feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or check out their webpage for the announcement. And my contact info is here. And I want to thank everyone who helped out funding the project, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was a really great presentation.
Sure, thank you. So I'm going to end. Should I leave this contact slide up or end it and come back on?
Well, we can leave it up if you want. That way people can see your email address right there, unless it is hurting your Wi-Fi. But
yeah, why don't I end it and I'll come back on? Then I think it'll help with the choppiness here.
No worries. We'll be putting it in the chat anyways. People can reach out. We do have a couple of questions that came in, so I'm thinking we'll just dive right in.
Okay, great.
This first person says,
Sure.
I've heard.
Go for it.
This first person says that I have heard that mowing, cutting, and digging Japanese knotweed often causes more aggressive rhizome growth. Is there any documentation of that you know of? This person has seen knotweed that has been cut and tarped grow underneath the foundation of a house and then pop up on the other side, which is crazy.
Yeah, I've heard of that I've read that a couple times that can happen. I've read that it comes up through asphalt. So the question was, is there documentation that mowing can increase the rhizome size? Not that I've seen, but again, knotweed is so tricky because the rhizomes are so large. So it could be that only part of the plant is being treated. But so no, I haven't seen documentation that mowing can make it worse. It can send up more shoots and more smaller shoots. That doesn't necessarily mean the rhizome is growing, though. It's an indication of plant stress. But is mowing alone enough? Probably not. Not for short-term control.
That's good to know. Yeah, thank you. I can actually answer this next question. It says, will the recordings be available soon? And we're live streaming to our YouTube channel, so I believe they should actually be available like right now, right after this session, so you can check them out anytime. This next question, how long do you need to dry cut vegetation before the stems are no longer viable?
Yeah, so I've read that it needs to be brown and crispy. So however long that takes, I think it just depends on the weather conditions in your area, but you want it completely dried out. To make sure that it's not viable anymore, but I'm not sure that there's a set time, just because humidity and sunlight can vary depending on your location.
Definitely. Okay, good to know. Herbicides usually say you can only use X ounce per acre, otherwise you're not using it according to the label. Did you have any issues with going over the application limit when using stem injections?
We did not have that issue in our study because it was a pilot, so it was a small study. So we didn't have, we weren't treating all of the knotweed in the area as part of this study, but I can see how that could possibly happen depending on how much you're treating. So yeah, that's something to be definitely considered and taken into account for it. I think any treatment protocol in any area is going to be a multi-year effort. So perhaps it could be spread out over time such that you're not exceeding that limit all in one go.
Okay, good to know. There's a couple questions here about the 20-year delay. So I'll kind of combine them. Like, why was there a 20-year delay? And what do those plots look like now, 20 years later? Are there any differences between those treatments?
Oh, that's an excellent question. 20-year delay just because other things happened, took another job, didn't have time to complete the analyses. What does it look like now? I doubt the plots are still in place. Yeah, because I cleaned up after the 1-year monitoring. My understanding is that the area is still being managed with mowing because it is a public access area. But that aerial photography that I showed earlier, that was from 2023, and there was still quite a bit of knotweed in the area. I didn't really talk too much about spread. I know that the first speaker, I didn't catch their names, but they talked about how it spreads downstream. So if there's still a continuous colony of knotweed upstream and there's a feed of those rhizomes coming down after every flood event, you're still going to have the knotweed input coming in. So it needs to be a watershed-wide control effort.
Okay, good to know. Well, thank you so much, Heather. We really appreciate your talk. If you have any other questions for Heather that we weren't able to get to, please email her directly. You can also connect with her on the Zoom events platform itself. But yeah, I really appreciate your time, Heather.
Thank you.
Awesome. So thanks so much to Heather and to all of our other speakers for such an informative session. Just want to quickly highlight an ISE resource that may be of interest to you. We have professional development opportunities through our invasive species training program. Our online courses are for those really looking to further their knowledge in invasive species prevention and management. We do have 4 forestry-related courses right now, but we have a noxious weed course in development. So stay tuned for that. You can sign up to receive updates on that new course through our website. So that's a wrap on this session. Up next is all about forest pests, and that's starting in a few minutes. So we'll see you there.